What if I told you that just closing your eyes and focusing on your breath for maybe 10 minutes a day physically alters your DNA? Like it literally changes the shape of your brain and rewires your immune system.
I mean, I know it sounds like science fiction
Yeah.
or, maybe some highly exaggerated wellness marketing pitch.
Right, like a late night infomercial.
Exactly. But the data we're looking at today, it proves that this is hard, measurable biological fact.
Yeah, and usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis or, changing our health, there's this expectation of absolute visible precision. It's almost like engineering.
Oh, absolutely. We love a clear cause and effect.
Right, like you break your arm, you go to the hospital, and the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the bone, and the doctor just points at the screen and says, well, there it is, that's the problem.
It's very binary. It's either broken or not broken. It's clean, and honestly, that's comforting to us. We naturally like things to be visible and easily categorized.
Exactly. But then, you step into the world of neurobiology or stress and chronic inflammation, and suddenly that x-ray machine is completely useless.
The diagnostic landscape just becomes incredibly murky.
It really does, because you feel exhausted, you feel anxious, your body aches, but there's no single broken bone to point to,
Right.
which is exactly why we are jumping into this material today.
It's so important to unpack this.
Yeah, and if you're joining us, I know exactly why you're here. You want to learn how your body actually works, you want the raw mechanics, but, you don't want to drown in a medical textbook.
Right. We're doing the heavy lifting for you.
Exactly. Today, we are tearing apart a massive stack of research. We've got neuroscience papers, endocrinology reviews, and this really fascinating study from UCLA Health on mitochondrial bioenergetics.
That UCLA study is just incredible.
It blew my mind. Our mission today is to figure out the exact anatomical, hormonal, and cellular cascade that happens when you meditate.
And, we really need to establish a major paradigm shift right out of the gate here. For decades, meditation was relegated to this very vague, almost dismissive category.
Like it was just a spiritual thing.
Exactly. Spiritual or just a basic relaxation tool. It was viewed as something you do just to feel a little less stressed after a hard day, kind of like taking a warm bath.
Right.
But the scientific sources we are analyzing today show that it is entirely different.
Yeah.
It is a precision, dose-dependent biological intervention.
A dose-dependent intervention. Let's just pause on that phrase because I love it. It frames human attention like a pharmaceutical.
Precisely.
I
Because
find
it literally alters gene expression. It changes the physical density of your brain structure.
it's wild.
It modulates the cells of your immune system, and it even dictates the rate of your cellular aging over time.
It's just incredible. I always used to picture the brain like a city grid. For years, the general scientific consensus was that by the time you reached your mid-20s, the roads were paved and the cement was dry.
The old dogma of the static adult brain.
Right. The traffic patterns were permanent. If you had a stressful, anxious route to get through your day, well, that's just the route you were stuck taking for the rest of your life.
But looking at these sources, it's clear that is entirely wrong.
Completely wrong, because meditation is essentially like hiring a team of microscopic urban planners inside your head. You are actively tearing up those old, stressful traffic patterns, repaving the roads, and building entirely new superhighways that are optimized for focus and emotional stability.
The concept you're describing is neuroplasticity. But what's truly fascinating here isn't just that the brain changes its structure.
Right?
The most compelling aspect of this research is why those structural changes at the top of the chain trigger a massive systemic cascade throughout the entire body.
It's like a domino effect.
Exactly. We're talking about architectural changes in the skull that alter the release of neurotransmitters. And those shift hormonal pathways, which then travel down your nervous system and eventually dictate how the mitochondria inside your cells reallocate energy.
It's all connected.
It's an intricate domino effect that leads to a state of long-term physiological homeostasis.
Meaning your body finally finds its perfect, most efficient balance. So how does this systemic cascade actually work? If we're tearing up the roads and repaving the city grid, where do these urban planners start digging first?
Well, we have to start at the absolute top of the chain, the hardware upgrades.
The brain itself.
Yes. Before we can even begin to understand the chemical messengers or the cellular repair happening in your organs, we have to look at the architectural reshaping of the brain's gray matter.
Let's talk about the CEO of this city grid, the prefrontal cortex, or the PFC.
A very busy CEO.
Yeah, and I was reading through the comprehensive framework from the Biomedical Journal of Scientific and Technical Research, and a specific data point practically jumped off the page. They found that long-term meditators show a 5 to 8% increase in gray matter density in the prefrontal cortex.
And to put that into perspective, a 5 to 8% structural increase in the brain's primary processing center is highly significant.
It sounds massive.
It is. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for your highest order executive functions. That includes your attentional control, your working memory capacity, your ability to form expectations, and complex decision-making.
So it's basically the boss of your brain.
Exactly. So when you see increased cortical thickness in this specific region, it isn't just a fun fact for a brain scan. It directly translates to enhanced executive function in your daily life. You are literally building a denser, more robust processing center for complex thought.
Okay, wait. This is where I have to play devil's advocate for a second because the physics of this are tripping me up.
Go for it.
The brain is encased in a hard, rigid bone skull. It's not a muscle that can just bulge out like a bicep.
Right, there's no room to expand.
Exactly. So how does thickening actually work? Are we just taking the exact same number of neurons and packing them tighter together? Or is the brain actually building new physical mass?
That is the perfect question, because the word thickening can be slightly misleading if you're picturing a muscle.
Yeah, that's what I was imagining.
When neuroscientists say the cortex thickens, they are talking about neuroplasticity at the microscopic level. You aren't just swelling the tissue. This structural change is the result of vastly enhanced synaptic connectivity.
Meaning the communication bridges between the brain cells.
Exactly. You are building more synapses so the neurons have more pathways to communicate with each other. But furthermore, there is an increase in a process called myelination.
Myelination. Okay, I've heard this term in relation to learning new skills. That's the insulation around the neural wires, right? Like the rubber coating on a copper wire.
That is a flawless analogy, yes. Myelin is a fatty white sheath that wraps around the axons. Those are the long, thread-like parts of a nerve cell.
Okay.
It acts exactly like the insulation on an electrical cable. Without myelin, an electrical signal traveling down a neuron can leak out, which slows the signal down or causes it to misfire.
Kind of like a short circuit.
Precisely. When a neuron is heavily myelinated, that electrical signal can travel up to 100 times faster and vastly more efficiently.
So the urban planners aren't just building new roads, they are paving the existing roads with high-speed, frictionless asphalt so the traffic can move flawlessly.
Beautifully put. But the research points to an even more crucial mechanism driving this structural reorganization, and it's a protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF.
Oh, BDNF. I see this mentioned constantly in sports science and exercise physiology. People always call it miracle grow for the brain.
And for very good reason. BDNF is a highly potent neurotrophic factor. It actively promotes the survival of your existing neurons, and it is the primary catalyst that encourages the growth, differentiation, and synaptic connection of completely new neurons.
So it literally grows new brain cells.
It does. Now, here is where the meditation data gets staggering. The sources highlight that just an 8-week mindfulness training program can increase peripheral blood BDNF levels by approximately 30%.
A 30% increase in brain miracle grow in just 2 months, just from sitting and breathing.
Yes. When you are meditating, the intense focus demands metabolic resources, and your body responds by actively upregulating the expression of these neurotrophic factors.
That is wild.
You are flooding your brain with the exact biochemical fertilizer it needs to build that extra 5 to 8% of gray matter in the prefrontal cortex.
Wow.
This is the underlying neurobiology of why your focus and cognitive control improve. You literally built a better machine.
Okay, so the prefrontal cortex, the CEO, gets a major upgrade. But our brain's city grid has other critical neighborhoods that dictate how we feel. Let's move over to the hippocampus.
The hippocampus.
I always think of this region as the brain's head archivist, the librarian sitting in the basement organizing all our memories.
The archivist is a great way to visualize it. And the hippocampus is absolutely essential for learning and memory consolidation. If you want to remember where you parked your car or the name of a person you just met, you need a healthy hippocampus. But it also has a second, deeply critical role that most people don't know about. It helps regulate the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which we'll just refer to as the HPA axis.
Oh, yeah.
That is your body's primary stress response system.
In reading through the World Journal of Pharmaceutical Science and Research, they make it very clear that chronic stress is basically toxic sludge to this archivist.
Highly toxic. Let's look at the mechanism. When you are stressed, your body produces cortisol, the primary stress hormone.
The famous cortisol.
Right. In acute, short-term situations like running from a predator, cortisol is life-saving. But in modern life, we're often chronically stressed.
Yeah.
And chronic elevation of cortisol literally impairs hippocampal neurogenesis.
It stops the birth of new
It
neurons.
stops them entirely, and over time, it physically shrinks the volume of the hippocampus.
So if you are constantly stressed about your job, your mortgage, your inbox, your memory centers are actively degenerating, your brain is shrinking.
Yes, it is a stress-induced structural decay. But this is where the dose-dependent intervention of meditation comes in.
Right, because we want to fix this.
The studies show increased gray matter density in the hippocampus among consistent meditators.
Because the meditation is lowering the overall cortisol level.
Exactly. It acts as a biological buffer. By consistently lowering systemic cortisol, you remove the toxic sludge.
You're cleaning out the basement.
Right. You protect the hippocampus from stress-induced neurodegeneration, which then allows for elevated neurogenesis. The archivist can finally get back to work building new shelves.
And zooming out, these structural brain changes effectively combat age-related cognitive decline over time. You aren't just improving your memory for today, you are building a fortified bunker against dementia and cognitive decay decades down the line.
You are preserving your cognitive lifespan, yes. It's preventative maintenance.
Okay, here is where the neuroanatomy gets really interesting to me. The insula.
The insula is fascinating.
It is, because it's a brain region I don't hear discussed very often in mainstream health podcasts, but the sources dive incredibly deep into its function. They say the insula is responsible for interoception.
Interoception is, simply put, the perception of your internal body states.
Okay.
It's your brain's ability to read your physical interior. That includes feeling your heartbeat, sensing your digestion, recognizing the rhythm of your breathing, or knowing when your stomach is full.
Right, and the paper breaks down this specific interoceptive neural pathway, and it's fascinating. Visceral signals, let's say a sudden drop in your blood pressure, travel up the vagus nerve, which is like the main highway out of the body into the brain.
Exactly.
The signal hits the solitary nucleus, moves to the parabrachial nucleus, passes through the thalamus, and finally lands in the posterior insula. Now, the posterior insula receives the raw data, but it's the anterior insula that translates that raw data into a conscious feeling that you actually notice.
And what the research highlights here is how meditation specifically and directly targets this exact pathway.
It thickens it. Right.
Yes, just 8 weeks of mindfulness training physically thickens the gray matter in the insular cortex.
And the practical result of that thickening is what blew my mind. The sources state that experienced meditators can accurately perceive physiological processes that are usually completely imperceptible to the average person.
They're hyper-aware.
Right. We are talking about having the ability to accurately feel minute fluctuations in your own blood pressure or sense subtle immune system activities. It's like upgrading the dashboard in your car.
I like that.
Most of us are driving around with a simple check engine light that only turns red when something is catastrophically wrong. But meditation upgrades that dashboard to a real-time, high-fidelity diagnostic telemetry screen.
That is a phenomenal analogy. The enhanced structural connectivity between the insular cortex and your visceral sensory pathways removes the static on the line.
Wow.
Most people are completely alienated from their physical state until they are in pain. With a thicker insula, you have high-fidelity, instantaneous awareness of your biological baseline.
Which naturally brings us to the amygdala. Because if you have this incredibly sensitive dashboard telling you everything happening in your body, couldn't that heightened awareness make you more prone to panic? Like, oh my God, my heart rate just spiked. I must be having a heart attack.
You would think so, yes.
But that doesn't happen because of what meditation does to the amygdala.
Exactly. The prefrontal cortex is the CEO, and the insula is the diagnostic dashboard. The amygdala is the building's fire alarm.
Right.
It is the primitive core of the brain's threat detection system.
And for a lot of us living in the modern world, that fire alarm feels like it is constantly ringing.
The amygdala evolved to process acute fear and anxiety to keep us alive. But today, it reacts to a passive-aggressive email the exact same way it reacts to a physical predator in the woods.
Your brain thinks the email is a tiger.
Exactly. It becomes hyperactive and structurally enlarged. However, extensive neuroimaging research, including functional MRI studies, shows that mindfulness and compassion meditation profoundly decrease amygdala reactivity to emotional stimuli.
And just like the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus, it's not just a temporary functional change, it's structural.
Yes. Long-term practitioners show a literal physical reduction in amygdala volume.
It shrinks.
The brain prunes away the excess synapses in the fear center. This anatomical change directly correlates with improved daily emotional stability, lower baseline anxiety, and severely decreased emotional volatility.
Let's break down exactly how a smaller amygdala translates to improved daily emotional stability. Because a common misconception is that meditation makes you numb. It's not that you start feeling emotions, right?
Not at all. It is fundamentally about the difference between a blind biological reaction and a measured cognitive response.
Okay, unpack that.
Let's look at the mechanics. When the amygdala is hyperactive and enlarged, it possesses the ability to essentially hijack the prefrontal cortex.
The fire alarm overpowers the CEO.
Precisely. You perceive a threat, that passive-aggressive email from your boss, and your massive amygdala immediately triggers a systemic stress response. Your
Yeah,
heart races, your palms sweat, you feel absolute panic.
been there.
And this happens before your prefrontal cortex has even had a fraction of a second to logically read the email and analyze the situation.
The fire alarm is so deafening that the CEO can't even think.
Right. But through meditation, you are simultaneously shrinking the volume of the amygdala and thickening the prefrontal cortex. You are strengthening the inhibitory control that the logical center has over the emotional center.
So the CEO gets a loudspeaker, and the fire alarm gets a volume dial.
That's a great way to look at it. You still read the stressful email, you still feel the annoyance, but you have the physical structural hardware to pause, evaluate the threat, and draft a professional response, rather than just panicking or throwing your laptop out the window.
That is the essence of emotional stability. It's structural inhibition. Now, this structural shift raises a really important question about how our brains spend their downtime when there isn't an active threat, which brings us to a fascinating network called the default mode network, or the DMN.
Ah, yes, the DMN.
I love the science around this. So is the DMN essentially the brain's idle screensaver? Like when you aren't focused on a specific task, this network turns on and just drains the battery by constantly looping self-referential thoughts, replaying awkward conversations from 5 years ago, and worrying about the future.
That is a highly accurate description. The default mode network, which relies heavily on a brain region called the posterior cingulate cortex, activates the moment your mind starts wandering.
Right?
It is the neural correlate of rumination and daydreaming. And for many people, that screensaver isn't pleasant. It's heavily anxious.
And the data shows a 15 to 20% decrease in DMN activity in regular meditators.
Yes. By training your attention to stay in the present moment, you're effectively turning off that anxious screensaver. Psychologically, you are reducing the self-referential, ego-driven thinking that so often fuels depression and daily anxiety.
That makes total sense.
But biologically, the implications are huge. The brain is an incredibly energy-hungry organ. It consumes about 20% of your body's total energy, despite being only 2% of its weight.
Wow.
Constantly running that anxious, ruminative screensaver is massively energetically demanding.
Which means quieting the DMN frees up a ton of metabolic energy, perfectly connecting the brain's architecture to how the rest of our body uses its resources.
Exactly.
Okay, let's step back and look at the city grid so far. We've done massive construction. The prefrontal cortex is thicker and heavily myelinated to enhance executive function.
Right.
The hippocampus is protected from toxic sludge. The insula is highly sensitive and tuned in. The amygdala is physically smaller to improve daily emotional stability. And the DMN's energy drain is plugged.
The hardware is fully upgraded.
The hardware is fully upgraded, but once the hardware is upgraded, the software running on it has to change its output.
And by software, we are talking about neurochemistry, the brain's chemical messaging system. The structural changes we just mapped out fundamentally and permanently alter the neurochemical signals that the brain sends down into the rest of the body.
Let's start with the most notorious chemical in the cocktail, the cortisol cascade. We've mentioned cortisol as the stress hormone, but the sources highlight a jaw-dropping metric. An 8-week mindfulness program reduces salivary cortisol by approximately 20 to 26%, with some baseline studies showing up to a 30% reduction.
To understand why a 30% drop is so critical for your survival, we have to trace the HPA axis step by step. It operates as a continuous biological feedback loop.
Okay, let's walk through it.
When you perceive a stressor, the hypothalamus, which sits deep in the center of the brain, releases a chemical called corticotropin-releasing hormone, or CRH.
Okay, so that's the first domino fall.
Right. CRH travels a very short distance to the pituitary gland, which is a tiny, pea-sized structure sitting just beneath the brain.
Domino 2.
The pituitary receives the CRH and says, okay, we need to mobilize. It then releases adrenocorticotropic hormone, or ACTH. ACTH then leaves the brain entirely. It travels down through your bloodstream until it reaches the adrenal glands, which are these little triangular hats sitting right on top of your kidneys.
The final domino.
Exactly. The adrenal cortex receives the ACTH and finally secretes cortisol into your system, flooding your body with the energy to fight or flee.
So how does a daily meditation practice actually interrupt this massive chemical cascade?
Because of the hardware upgrades. Because meditation physically reduced the volume and hyperactivity of the amygdala and quieted the fear response, the hypothalamus simply doesn't get triggered as often.
Oh, I see.
Therefore, less CRH is released at the very beginning of the loop. That prompts the pituitary to release less ACTH, meaning the adrenal glands are never given the signal to secrete cortisol.
You aren't just dealing with stress better. You are literally turning off the cortisol faucet at its absolute source in the brain. That is profound. Let's discuss the connection between this cortisol reduction and long-term hormonal balance. Because cortisol doesn't just make you feel jittery or stressed in the moment. If it's chronically elevated, it wreaks havoc on virtually every system in the body.
It is systemic destruction. We already covered how chronic cortisol destroys the hippocampus and accelerates cognitive decline. But its impact on your circadian rhythm is equally devastating.
How so?
Cortisol and melatonin, your sleep hormone, function on a biological seesaw. If cortisol remains high throughout the day and into the evening, it actively suppresses the release of melatonin.
So you can't fall asleep, or if you do, your sleep is garbage.
Exactly. It ruins your sleep architecture. You miss out on deep, restorative, slow-wave sleep. You wake up exhausted, which makes your amygdala more reactive to stress the next day.
Which keeps your cortisol high.
Which again suppresses your melatonin. It is a vicious, self-perpetuating loop.
So lowering that baseline cortisol through meditation is the only way to protect your memory and prevent those diurnal rhythm disruptions that completely ruin your mood and emotional well-being over the long term.
Right. It's about breaking that loop.
Okay, so that's how meditation dials down the destructive chemicals. Let's talk about how it dials up the good stuff. I want to explore how meditation alters hormonal pathways and neurotransmitter levels to actually improve our mood. Let's start with dopamine.
Dopamine is fascinating here. In pop culture, dopamine is often vastly oversimplified as just the pleasure or reward chemical.
Like the hit you get from eating sugar or scrolling social media.
Right. But biologically, dopamine is really the neurotransmitter of motivation, salience, focus, and drive. It's what makes you want to pursue goals.
And the World Journal of Pharmaceutical Science and Research Review cites a PET scan study that just floored me. They observed a massive 65% increase in endogenous dopamine release in the brain's striatum during a focused meditation session.
A 65% surge is extraordinary. To put that in context, that is a highly robust neurochemical response, rivaling the spikes seen in rigorous physical exercise or even certain pharmacological interventions.
But this is completely endogenous.
Entirely. Created completely by your own brain in response to focused attention.
65%. That completely explains why so many people report feeling incredibly driven, motivated, and clear-headed after a deep morning meditation practice. You are basically brewing your own premium espresso inside your striatum.
It's a great natural boost.
And then, alongside dopamine, we have serotonin.
Yes. Serotonin is the primary neurotransmitter responsible for stabilizing our mood, reducing impulsivity, and generating generalized feelings of well-being and contentment.
Right.
But the sources highlight a highly specific and vital biological pathway here involving serotonin and the pineal gland.
The pineal gland's serotonin-melatonin pathway. This blew my mind when I read it, and it feels crucial for anyone struggling with long-term hormonal balance. Walk us through this.
Biologically, serotonin is the direct biochemical precursor to melatonin. There are two sides of the same chemical coin.
Wait, let me make sure I'm translating this correctly. You're saying that the exact hormone that makes us feel happy, stable, and content while the sun is up, serotonin, is the exact same molecular building block that the body physically morphs into the hormone that puts us to sleep when the sun goes down.
That is exactly what happens. They are intrinsically molecularly linked.
That's crazy.
Your pineal gland, a tiny endocrine gland near the center of your brain, takes the serotonin you produce during the day and chemically converts it into melatonin at night.
Wow.
Therefore, when meditation naturally increases your serotonin synthesis during your waking hours, it is essentially filling up a reservoir. It provides a vastly larger pool of raw chemical material for the pineal gland to use later.
So how does this actually reset circadian rhythms and improve sleep quality? Because if you have insomnia, this seems like an absolute superpower.
It is a profound regulatory mechanism. Because of that larger serotonin reservoir, meditators show a 20 to 25% increase in nocturnal melatonin levels.
Just from meditating during the day?
Yes. And in some studies of long-term practitioners, that spike goes up to a 40% increase. Now, melatonin doesn't just make you feel drowsy. It physically optimizes your sleep architecture.
What does that mean?
It dictates the cycles of your brainwaves, ensuring you spend adequate time in both restorative deep sleep and REM sleep, where emotional processing happens. But beyond sleep regulation, melatonin has a secret second life.
Oh.
It is a wildly potent endogenous antioxidant.
Wait, slow down. Melatonin fights cellular stress. I thought it just made you tired.
That is a common misconception. While you are sleeping, melatonin actively scavenges for free radicals in your brain. It protects your neural cells against oxidative damage.
So optimizing the serotonin-melatonin pathway through daytime meditation isn't just about feeling happier at lunch or falling asleep faster at midnight.
No, not at all.
It is a fundamental, non-negotiable mechanism for deep cellular repair.
It really is.
And obviously, that nightly hormonal shift aids long-term cognitive health.
Yeah.
If you are sleeping deeply and your brain is physically clearing out oxidative stress and metabolic waste every single night, you are massively protecting against neurodegeneration and diseases like Alzheimer's.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You are utilizing your own neurochemistry to perform nightly preventative maintenance on your brain.
Okay, we have to talk about one more essential chemical in this neurochemical cocktail before we move on. GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid.
GABA.
Yeah.
GABA is the central nervous system's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. If dopamine is the gas pedal for motivation and action, GABA is the emergency brake pedal for your nervous system.
And the sources show that GABA concentrations increase by roughly 20%, particularly in yoga-based meditation practices.
Right. When GABA activity is enhanced in the brain, it provides profound anxiolytic, meaning anti-anxiety effects. It works by literally inhibiting the overfiring of neurons that cause feelings of panic, racing thoughts, or acute anxiety. What is so remarkable from a medical perspective is that meditation is inducing an entirely endogenous release of GABA that mimics the exact mechanism of action of powerful pharmacological agents.
Like taking a Valium or a Xanax.
Exactly. Benzodiazepines work by enhancing GABA receptor activity. But meditation provides that same inhibitory, calming brake pedal entirely naturally, without the chemical side effects, the brain fog, or the dependency issues associated with those drugs.
That's incredible. Okay, let's look at the map again. We have the hardware built out. The prefrontal cortex is dense. The insula is dialed in. The amygdala is smaller.
Yep.
We have the software running perfectly. Cortisol is shut down at the source, while dopamine, serotonin, melatonin, and GABA are surging. But all of this is happening up in the skull.
Right.
How do these brain and chemical changes actually reach the organs? Like, how does a thought change a heartbeat?
Well, the signal has to leave the brain and travel down the primary superhighway of the human body.
The nervous system.
Yes, specifically the autonomic nervous system, which heavily relies on the vagus nerve.
Which brings us to the bridge between the mind and the body. We are moving out of the brain, down the neck, and into the chest. The heart, the lungs, and vagal tone. Let's define this autonomic shift for everyone. Our autonomic nervous system, the system that runs all our automatic bodily functions, has two main branches.
Yes. You have the sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight-or-flight response. It is driven by the release of adrenaline and norepinephrine. Its job is to mobilize energy for immediate survival.
And the other side.
Then you have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest state. This branch is heavily regulated by the vagus nerve, which wanders from your brainstem all the way down through your torso, touching your heart, lungs, and digestive tract.
It sounds to me like most of us in the modern, hyper-connected world are driving our cars with the parking brake on. We are absolutely flooring the gas pedal, the sympathetic nervous system, fueled by stress and caffeine while grinding the gears, just trying to force our way through the day.
Sadly, yes.
Meditation essentially takes the parking brake off.
That is a perfect visualization of allostatic load. You're burning massive amounts of fuel, but causing immense wear and tear on the engine. Meditation is the act of taking your foot off the sympathetic gas pedal and engaging the parasympathetic system, achieving a state of systemic homeostatic balance.
Let's look at the actual cardiovascular data because it is staggering. detail how meditation reduces heart rate and blood pressure through this autonomic nervous regulation.
Let's do it.
The sources state that systolic blood pressure drops by 4 to 5 millimeters of mercury and diastolic drops by 2 to 3.
To understand how that actually happens biologically, we have to look at the blood vessels.
Okay.
Because meditation actively decreases the brain's release of catecholamines, which are stress hormones like adrenaline and noradrenaline. There is significantly less sympathetic stimulation bombarding the heart muscle.
So the heart doesn't have to beat as violently.
Right. Furthermore, the parasympathetic shift increases the bioavailability of a molecule called nitric oxide in your bloodstream.
Nitric oxide, that's a vasodilator, right? It acts on the smooth muscles inside your blood vessels.
Precisely. Nitric oxide signals the inner lining of your blood vessels to relax and widen.
So you have a twofold effect.
Yes. A reduction in the adrenaline pushing the blood, and a physical widening of the pipes carrying the blood. The result is a highly efficient, sustainable drop in overall blood pressure and a significant reduction in cardiac workload. You are literally saving your heart millions of unnecessary beats over a lifetime.
That is huge for long-term health. But the most important metric here isn't just a lower resting heart rate. It's a metric called heart rate variability, or HRV.
HRV is crucial.
I feel like HRV is the new gold standard metric on every smartwatch, but a lot of people don't fully understand it. Explain why higher HRV is actually better. Because intuitively, I think a lot of people assume a perfectly steady heart rate, beating like a clock, is the sign of a healthy heart.
It is highly counterintuitive, but a perfectly steady heart rate, ticking exactly like a metronome, actually indicates a highly stressed, inflexible, and exhausted autonomic system. Yes. In a healthy body, your heart rate is constantly making micro-adjustments. When you inhale, your heart rate should naturally speed up just a tiny fraction of a second to circulate the new oxygen. And when you exhale, it should naturally slow down.
Okay, that makes sense.
That micro variation in the milliseconds between the beats is your HRV.
So higher variability means your body is highly responsive and sensitive to its environment and its own breath.
Yes, high HRV indicates a flexible, adaptable, and resilient nervous system. In biofeedback studies, researchers analyzed something called high-frequency power in HRV readings. Increased high-frequency power directly reflects enhanced parasympathetic vagal nerve activity. Meditation actively trains and exercises this autonomic flexibility.
And breathing techniques directly regulate this respiratory efficiency and heart rate. The sources mention a phenomenon called respiratory sinus arrhythmia, or RSA.
RSA is the exact physiological phenomenon we just described, the heart rate synchronizing with the rhythm of the breath. When you practice focused meditation, particularly structured breathing exercises, you naturally decrease your respiratory rate and increase your tidal volume, which is the sheer volume of air you take in per breath.
Deep, slow belly breaths.
Exactly. This optimizes oxygen utilization and improves gas exchange in the alveoli of the lungs. But most importantly, this deep, rhythmic breathing physically stretches the diaphragm, which actively stimulates the vagal afferent nerves.
And those nerves send a signal.
Those nerves immediately fire a signal back up the superhighway to the brain saying, hey, the breathing is slow, we must be safe.
We are safe. It's a biofeedback loop in real time. The brain changes the breath calms the beating heart, the heart signals the brain via the vagus nerve that everything is fine, which further lowers cortisol production at the source.
It's a brilliant self-reinforcing cycle of calm.
Which sets us up for the deepest, most microscopic part of our dive. We are moving from organ systems down into the cells themselves.
This is the cellular and molecular frontier, the downstream biological effect of taking your foot off that sympathetic gas pedal and calming the heart is that the body finally has the surplus energy and the biological resources to repair its own cells.
This is the journey from chronic stress to lasting cellular resilience. Let's start with the mind-mitochondria connection. We have some incredible excerpts from the MISB study published in Trends in Endocrinology and Metabolism out of UCLA Health.
The MISB study is a massive leap forward in our understanding of human health. Traditionally, we all learned in high school biology that mitochondria are simply the powerhouses of the cell.
Right, the little batteries.
But this research repositions mitochondria as the key environmental sensors and regulators of our entire stress biology. Mitochondria provide the ATP, the cellular energy for the brain, and all the major endocrine glands.
And the sources say that maintaining a stress response is incredibly highly energetically demanding.
It is a massive drain on the system. Maintaining a state of allostasis, which is the biological process of constantly trying to adapt to chronic psychological stress, requires an immense amount of ATP. Your body is basically keeping all the factory lights on 24/7, ready for an attack.
Now, the UCLA study outlines a concept called the GMR shift, and this is crucial. GMR stands for growth, maintenance, and repair. When you are under chronic stress, your mitochondria literally devote energy away from GMR processes and send all that power to the stress response systems.
Researchers term this mitochondrial allostatic load. Think of it like a city under siege.
Okay, I like city analogies.
The urban planners take all the money meant for fixing potholes, repairing bridges, and maintaining the parks, and they divert every single cent to the military for defense.
Because the city is under attack.
Right. This diversion of energy is the exact molecular mechanism that accounts for the stress aging and stress disease cascades. Your cells literally do not have the energy left over to repair their own structural damage or fight off routine mutations.
But meditation redirects this energy flow back to restoration.
Yes, because your hardware upgrades have lowered the systemic demand for a stress response. You have lowered the cortisol, lowered the adrenaline, slowed the heart. The mitochondria receive the signal that the siege is over.
The war is won.
Exactly. They immediately shift ATP energy production back to growth, maintenance, and repair.
The UCLA study gets incredibly granular to prove this. They literally mutated specific mitochondrial genes in mice to see what would happen.
They did. They impaired specific genes involved in the mitochondrial respiratory chain. And they found that these purely energetic mitochondrial defects completely altered how the mice responded to psychological stress and anxiety.
What that means is that the state of your microscopic mitochondria dictates your psychological resilience. They are information transducers. Let's explain ROS, because that came up in the data.
ROS stands for reactive oxygen species. They are essentially a natural byproduct of cellular energy production, like the exhaust smoke from an engine. The mitochondria use the production of ROS as a chemical signaling mechanism to communicate with the nucleus of the cell. If your mitochondria are stressed, damaged, and overproducing ROS exhaust, they trigger abnormal, highly inflammatory neuroendocrine responses.
So by meditating, slowing the breath, and removing that chronic energy drain, we are quite literally healing our cellular power plants so they can stop producing toxic exhaust.
Precisely.
Let's talk about the immune system next, because that energy reallocation directly impacts how we fight disease. Summarize the specific link between lower stress levels and improved immune system competence.
The Biomedical Journal of Scientific and Technical Research Framework defines an intention neuroimmune regulatory axis.
That's a mouthful.
It is, but it's vital. Because chronic stress and high cortisol aggressively suppress immune function, the meditation-induced drop in cortisol immediately allows the immune system to rebound and boost overall immune competence.
The data points are robust. The research shows a dramatic reduction in pro-inflammatory cytokines, specifically IL-6, TNF-alpha, and CRP. And simultaneously, they measure a massive boost in natural killer cell activity, as well as CD3, CD4, and CD8 cellular immunity markers.
Right.
Okay, let's translate that alphabet soup for someone who hasn't been in a biology class for 20 years. Explain how meditation boosts these specific cells and reduces inflammation.
Think of your immune system as a highly organized military. The CD4 cells are like your four-star generals. They coordinate the response to an invader like a virus. The CD8 cells are the infantry soldiers that destroy infected cells.
Okay.
And the natural killer, or NK cells, are the special ops forces that specifically hunt down and eliminate nascent tumor cells and viruses.
And what are the cytokines like IL-6 and CRP?
Cytokines are the chemical alarm signals that cause inflammation. They're like the biological fire used to burn out an infection.
Yeah.
Now, when your sympathetic nervous system is constantly firing due to modern stress, it tells the immune system to prepare for physical trauma, which paradoxically leads to the continuous release of those cytokines. You develop chronic, low-grade systemic inflammation. Your body is basically constantly slightly on fire.
But by shifting to parasympathetic dominance through meditation, you shut down the inflammatory cascade. You put out the fire.
Exactly. You reduce the IL-6 and CRP while simultaneously supercharging the generals, the infantry, and the special ops forces.
That is so important.
This is critical because chronic, unchecked inflammation is the root physiological cause of almost every major degenerative disease we face, from cardiovascular pathology to autoimmune disorders and dementia.
So meditation directly strengthens immunity against long-term chronic inflammation. We are actively instructing our biology to stand down from red alert, put away the fire, and start rebuilding the city. Which brings us to perhaps the most mind-bending sci-fi part of this entire research stack: epigenetics and cellular longevity.
Gene expression, the fundamental reading of your DNA.
Yes, we aren't just changing our feelings or our hormones or even our immune cells. We are literally changing how our DNA is read and transcribed. I need you to discuss meditation and gene expression because this feels like a superpower.
The World Journal of Pharmaceutical Science and Research cites a landmark study originally published in Translational Psychiatry. They took blood samples before and after mindfulness practice and found that over 200 specific gene transcripts are significantly altered by meditation.
200 genes change their behavior just from sitting and breathing.
Yes. Specifically, the researchers observed a massive downregulation, a turning off of pro-inflammatory genes, particularly those regulated by the NF-kappa B pathways.
NF-kappa B, let's explain that. It's basically a master genetic switch for inflammation in the body, right?
Exactly. NF-kappa B is a protein complex that controls the transcription of DNA related to inflammation and cell survival. When it's activated by stress, it tells the DNA to print more inflammation.
Fight more fire.
Right. Meditation literally reaches into the cell and flips that master switch to the off position. Concurrently, it upregulates or turns on the genes involved in mitochondrial function, energy metabolism, and insulin secretion.
That is awe-inspiring. And then there are the telomeres. Describe how meditation specifically impacts gene expression and telomere maintenance to protect ourselves from aging.
Telomeres are the protective caps situated at the very end of our chromosomes. The classic, most accurate analogy is to think of them as the little plastic tips on the ends of your shoelaces.
The aglets.
Exactly, the aglets. Every single time a cell in your body divides to replicate itself, those telomeres get just a little bit shorter.
Okay.
When they eventually get too short and fray completely, the cell can no longer divide safely and it undergoes apoptosis or cell death. This shortening process is the literal biological ticking clock of cellular aging.
And chronic psychological stress, high cortisol, and oxidative damage vastly accelerate this shortening process. You are burning through your telomeres.
But the research reveals that regular meditation significantly increases the activity of an enzyme called telomerase.
And what does that do?
Telomerase is the biological mechanic that actually rebuilds, repairs, and lengthens those protective telomere caps.
So by lowering cortisol and increasing that vagal parasympathetic tone, meditation promotes a cellular environment where telomerase can thrive and rebuild your DNA's armor.
Yes. Furthermore, it regulates oxidative stress. Meditation actively increases the genetic expression and levels of endogenous antioxidant enzymes, specifically superoxide dismutase, or SOD, glutathione peroxidase, and catalase.
The cellular cleanup crew.
Exactly. These powerful enzymes patrol the cell and neutralize free radicals and reactive oxygen species before they have a chance to damage your DNA or fray your telomeres.
So by boosting these internal antioxidants and increasing telomerase activity, consistent meditation practices actively combat cellular aging and systemic cognitive decline. You are literally protecting the structural integrity of your DNA from the ravages of time and stress.
This is how these structural brain changes, the hormonal shifts, and the molecular alterations effectively combat age-related disease over time. You are preventing the stress-induced shrinking of the hippocampus, you are lowering the systemic inflammation that causes neurodegeneration, and you are protecting the telomere length of your neural cells.
It is the ultimate holistic intervention. Let's frame these biological shifts as a complete narrative journey from stress to cellular resilience. It is an incredible arc.
It really is.
We start with nothing more than a thought, a conscious intention to focus. That invisible intention physically thickens the prefrontal cortex and shrinks the fear center in the amygdala.
The hardware changes.
Right. Those architectural upgrades lower the release of cortisol and boost dopamine, serotonin, and melatonin. Those chemical changes travel down the vagus nerve, physically slowing the heart, lowering blood pressure, and increasing HRV.
The software and the superhighway.
And that systemic calm signals your microscopic mitochondria to stop fighting phantom threats, redirect their energy, and start repairing your telomeres and your DNA.
It perfectly synthesizes how autonomic regulation and endocrine shifts combine to create lasting physiological homeostasis.
Okay, so we've mapped out the entire human physiology. The profound question for you, listening to this right now, is how do you actually trigger this cascade in your own body?
Application is everything.
Exactly. How do you put yourself in the driver's seat of this neuroimmune axis today? Let's create a narrative arc about daily habit formation and actual physiological improvement. How do we apply this?
Well, the most important fundamental principle to establish first is the dose-response reality. These structural and cellular changes are highly dose-dependent, meaning the more consistently you practice, the stronger the biological effect. But crucially, the research notes a long-term follow-up study showing that these structural brain changes are entirely reversible.
Reversible, meaning if you stop practicing, your gray matter density gradually returns to its original baseline.
Yes, neuroplasticity works in both directions. If you stop demanding focus from your brain, the brain will prune away those extra synapses in the prefrontal cortex to save energy.
So this isn't some one and done biohack where you meditate for a weekend retreat and you're cured forever. It requires strict habit formation. It's exactly like going to the gym for your nervous system. If you stop lifting weights, you lose the muscle mass.
Precisely. So we need to look at sustainable, highly targeted daily practices.
I want to list 3 specific simple meditation routines drawn from the research for enhancing daily autonomic nervous system balance. Routine 1 is mindful breathing, which the scientific framework categorizes as a focused attention practice.
The execution here is very straightforward. You dedicate 10 to 15 minutes daily, you sit comfortably, close your eyes, and focus your attention entirely on the physical sensation of your natural inhalation and exhalation.
Usable enough?
You do not try to control or force the breath, you just observe it. Now, when your mind inevitably wanders, and it will, because that is exactly what the default mode network is programmed to do, you gently, without judgment or frustration, notice the distraction and bring your focus back to the breath.
And the specific biological why behind this, what is happening in the brain?
This specific practice directly targets and exercises the prefrontal cortex. The exact moment of noticing your mind has wandered and actively redirecting your focus back to the breath is essentially a bicep curl for your executive function.
A bicep curl for the brain. I love that.
It heavily enhances prefrontal activation, which reduces the HPA axis activation, lowers cortisol, and directly improves your working memory and cognitive load efficiency over time.
That's brilliant. Okay, routine 2 is compassion or loving kindness meditation, which the framework classifies as a constructive strategy.
The mechanics here involve actively generating specific mental content. Rather than just neutrally focusing on the breath, you actively focus on generating profound feelings of empathy, gratitude, and unconditional positive regard.
Okay.
You direct it first toward yourself, then expand it outward to loved ones, then to acquaintances, and eventually to all beings.
I'll admit, generating feelings of love on purpose sounds a bit esoteric to a lot of people, maybe a bit woo-woo, but the biology backing this up is hard science. What is the why here?
This specific practice directly targets the insula and the anterior cingulate cortex. Neuroimaging reveals that the act of generating these constructive feelings triggers a massive systemic release of oxytocin and endorphins.
Oxytocin, the classic bonding hormone?
Yes, but oxytocin is also profoundly anti-inflammatory. This practice strongly suppresses inflammatory cytokines, particularly IL-6.
So it puts out the fire.
Exactly. From a physiological standpoint, this routine is incredibly effective for enhancing social and emotional resilience and providing a deep biological buffer against psychosocial stress.
Routine 3 is a physiological hack. Yoga-based alternate nostril breathing. The traditional Sanskrit term is anuloma viloma.
The execution involves a targeted breathing technique where you physically use your fingers to close off one nostril, inhale deeply through the open nostril, then close that nostril and exhale slowly through the first. It combines physical posture, precise breath control, and focused attention.
And what is the why for autonomic balance here? Why manipulate the nostrils?
This practice is highly effective for rapidly balancing the sympathetic and parasympathetic branches of the nervous system. Because you are heavily controlling the breath rate, it optimizes heart rate variability almost immediately.
Oh, wow.
By consciously exaggerating the respiratory sinus arrhythmia we discussed earlier, you rapidly increase vagal afferent signaling. This massive signal pushes the brain to instantly release parasympathetic neurotransmitters like acetylcholine and GABA. It is arguably the best tool for immediate acute stress relief in real time.
So we have 3 distinct tools, creating 3 distinct physiological outcomes. Focused attention to build prefrontal thickness and reduce cortisol. Compassion practice to release oxytocin, activate the insula, and kill inflammation. And alternate nostril breathing for immediate vagal tone and a surge of calming GABA.
Synthesizing how autonomic regulation and endocrine shifts combine, these practices offer a truly comprehensive toolkit for lasting physiological homeostasis.
Okay, let's bring this all together. By choosing to sit still, close your eyes, and direct your attention, You are doing so much more than just relaxing. You are actively, physically thickening your prefrontal cortex to improve your focus. You are pruning and shrinking your amygdala to stay emotionally stable.
Yes.
You are altering the literal transcription of over 200 genes. You are balancing a massive cocktail of neurotransmitters to improve your mood, your motivation, and your sleep architecture. And you are instructing your microscopic mitochondria to divert energy back to repairing your DNA instead of fighting phantom threats. You are quite literally rewriting your own biological user manual from the inside out.
It is a profound realization that conscious intention can directly command cellular biology.
Which leaves us with one final, totally mind-expanding concept drawn from the biophysics theories mentioned at the very end of the sources. We were geeking out over this before we started recording. It's called the CEMI field theory, the conscious electromagnetic information field theory.
This hypothesis truly pushes the boundaries of how we currently understand the brain and physics.
Oh, it really does.
The theory proposes that the brain-mind system might not just be a fleshy computer of chemical synapses. It might actually be a holographic network of electromagnetic energy oscillations and biophotons.
Biophotons, literally subatomic particles of light existing inside our cells. The idea is that human cognition and consciousness aren't just neurochemical signals jumping across synapses in the dark, but they are actually embedded in the biophysical electromagnetic field generated by the brain.
Exactly.
So if the act of meditation regulates our molecular biology to this degree, the truly provocative question is this: could the highly synchronized, coherent brainwaves of deep meditation, that massive increase in alpha and theta waves, actually be tuning your body's electromagnetic field to resonate perfectly with the environment around you?
It suggests that human intention and awareness are not merely psychological phenomena, but fundamental physical forces capable of interacting with and organizing our cellular substrate at a quantum level.
A holographic network of energy inside your head, interacting with the universe. That is something for you to mull over the next time you close your eyes and just try to focus on your breath. Thank you for joining us on this incredibly deep dive. We started by looking at a broken X-ray machine, realizing that the muddy waters of human biology, chronic stress, and consciousness are vastly more complex than a simple black and white image of a broken bone.
Vastly more complex.
But as we've seen today, diving into the anatomy, the chemistry, and the cellular biology, that exact complexity is what gives you the unbelievable power to heal, to adapt, and to upgrade your system. The power to rewrite your biology is literally all in your head.
Until next time.